I mean, it seems to me that like this is the summer of unionization, or really, I mean, this has been growing, it feels like, for a couple of years, to be honest. But uh, we're going to start to see a lot more unions formed.
Well, there has been a huge lag between, workers and public opinion on unions and the decrepit law until now. And the timing of this is such that it will, empower workers much more than they have been. And, we wait to see the union response. Now, Steve Greenhouse and I, the former New York Times labor beat guy for forever, Steve and I wrote a piece in the Prospect about a year ago, about a year ago, are saying, okay, in 1935, the National Labor Relations Act was passed, and almost immediately, the more militant unions, and ones that even historically hadn't been militant, but decided to become militant, like the mine workers and the amalgamated clothing workers, formed their own CIO, went out and devoted huge resources within 8-9 months of the Wagner Act passing. Before it was upheld by the Supreme Court, which didn't happen for another 2 years. They went out and provided huge resources to organizing industry, steel, auto, etc. And Greenhouse and I wrote, okay, where the hell are today's unions? How many of them are spending more than that 3% I mentioned earlier in the broadcast? So now I think this is a real test for unions, and there are about 10 dozen or so unions that have considerable organizing departments, but nowhere near what they need to be right now. Now is the time that they should be gearing up and, going at full speed. I mean, okay, it's been, 4 days since the decision.
Right.
It takes a little longer than that. But, the starter's gun, which no one had been able to even locate for half a century, has just gone off.
Okay. How much did they anticipate this? Like, I mean, did the teams, because, and to be clear, the Cemex case, they were going in and saying, we lost our election to have a union at this place called Cemex, the Teamsters. We wanted to, we filled out our cards. We got the election date, but in between that time, this is after the election. They've lost the election. It was a very close election. They came to the National Labor Relations Board and they said they were doing stuff like, mandatory meetings where they were telling us the union was bad, and they were punishing people who were organizers, and they were firing people and this and that. And so we want another election. And the board said, actually, we're going to change the rules, or we're going to go back to the way that it used to be. And instead of offering you another election, we're just going to say, you got the union at Cemex. How much was the Teamsters anticipating that?
I am.
How much were you anticipating that? To the extent that you could tell us.
I've been writing about Abruzzo. I first profiled Abruzzo a year and a half ago. I have been waiting for something like this, and I wrote about her memo as soon as she got on the job, saying, "Hey, we should look at go back to Joy Silk." When I started talking on that article, a very one of the best labor law professors in the country told me no one even remembered Joy Silk. It hadn't been law for 52 years. So this has been creeping up, and I should also add that the board issued its decision at a time when most of the labor beat reporters were on vacation, so it still hasn't been reported adequately in the national press where you would think it would have been.
Yep.
The Teamsters already, have had considerable strategizing about Amazon. There's no question about that, and I think there were aspects of the UPS contract that were not only good, obviously, for UPS workers, but really were there with an eye towards Amazon, in particular, like compelling the company to stop the camera surveilling their drivers. Well, who are the most surveilled by camera
Right.
workers in the world? It's the Amazon warehouse workers. So the Teamsters have been, revving this up. They have maintained a good organizing department. And I think they're, at this point, they're getting ready to pounce. It's not clear to me exactly what other unions are going to do. I mean, we know for a fact that the auto workers and other unions have not been successful organizing all of the plants in the South, many of them owned by, companies headquartered elsewhere that are unionized in their home
Right.
country.
Was it Mississippi that had that Volkswagen plant? Was that the big one that?
That was Tennessee, the Volkswagen
Tennessee, sorry.
at
Yes,
Chattanooga.
yes.
Yeah, but I mean, also, I think it was Nissan in Mississippi, BMW, Boeing has this factory now in South Carolina where the rate of unionization is 2.9%. They've all struck out. Now would be the time to go back. Obviously the auto workers have got to deal immediately with the big three or the legacy three. But, after that, all those factories and the factories springing up now, that are lithium ion battery factories and electric car, they're now much more plausible targets for successful organizing than they were at the beginning of last week.
So, we will get a sense. I mean, I guess, I would imagine we'll be able to read from labor reporters in the next couple of months which unions are saying we are now dedicating 5%, 8%, 9% to organizing. And by that, they mean, for folks who aren't aware, we're going to go out and find shops, or we're going to put out more resources for people who come to us and they're working at this shop or that shop, or we're going to see this industry or that industry, and we're going to go there and we're going to see if there's interest in the workers there forming a union, and we're going to provide them support. We're going to provide them training. We're going to provide them know-how, and we're going to get this going to expand the unionization across the country. If the Teamsters, how much, I would imagine also, though, Amazon has got to be a little bit freaked out right now, right? Starbucks.
Well, not just
Starbucks,
Amazon. This is really, a blow that, they may have feared, but was not foremost in their minds. And there's a whole industry, there's a whole union suppression industry, law firms like Littler Mendelson and what have you. And, they're looking at this and saying, oh my God, this is 80% of our business. What are we still permitted to do? What they're still permitted to do, of course, is to try to get, the courts to reverse this.
What's your sense of that? I mean, because this is their livelihood. It would be like as if there's a ruling out there tomorrow that all of a sudden said, no more political YouTube shows. You can't do any more political podcasts. And I would be like, well, wait a second. But that's what these union busting firms are hearing today, is that their very practices, because it was always built into the just sort of the cost of doing business. We're going to get fined for this. But at the end of the day, the breaches in labor law that we practice will inhibit a union from showing up even in that second election, because we'll have already done the damage, and we get fined for it. Fine. That's just the cost of doing business.
They don't get fined for it. It's the employer who gets fined.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
They get paid for it.
Oh, right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. But
there's no downside for them. This is their meat.
Well, but this is a downside for them, because all of a sudden the employer's like, we can't hire you anymore, because hiring you is going to guarantee a union.
Yeah. Well, if this takes the normal course through the courts, it probably would take a couple years to reach the Supreme Court. On the other hand, the court, the right-wingers on the court have now got this thing that they do this, preliminary hearing, major case, whatever it is.
Right. Major case doctrine, major questions doctrine. Yes.
Yeah. Now, I don't doubt that, Sam Alito, who was born hating unions, would love to do that and can get Clarence Thomas along with him. How much in this particular political context the court wants to do that when union approval ratings are about at 70%, and when millennial and Gen Z union approval rating is, according to one poll that the AFL-CIO released yesterday, at 88%.
Wow.
How much they want to deal with that, I don't know. I don't know if the sort of John Roberts, well, not so fast sensibility would apply to the other conservative justices. We'll see.
In terms of knock-on impact too, I would imagine that if an employer is like looking at this and saying, okay, we can't hire union busting firms now as a way of inhibiting a union, what we're going to have to do, because we don't want a union, what we're going to have to do is like basically come up with better compensation in whatever forms for our workers to stave off a union. So this is going to have that sort of knock-on impact, that the fear of a union, because you can't sort of inhibit it by doing unfair labor practices, you're actually going to have to get like more fair labor practices. Like you're going to have to go beyond what you've been doing.
It could. And there was an economist at Princeton some years ago, whose name I do not remember, who documented that in industries where at least a quarter of the workers were unionized, non-union companies had to raise wages about 10% higher than non-union companies in industries where there wasn't that much unionization. So it could be analogous to that better to raise the wages and the benefits or whatever than to actually have a union, which is, of course, as I said, what would be the effect of that brief that Abruzzo has submitted to the board.
All right. I have one more question about the sort of the mechanics of this, and then I just want to get into just one other question about the timing that you wrote about. One of the things that this ruling also applies to pending cases. What, if I understand, what does that mean? In other words, like Trader Joe's is going back, and they are saying like we had unfair labor practices and for the elections, but like, are there cases in front of the board or like stacked up waiting to be heard from the board of unfair labor practices following other elections with the hope of getting another election that would now be ruled like, okay, there were unfair labor practices. Boom, your union's recognized?
That is a great question to which I cannot give you a definitive answer, but I would assume, okay, it's clear that any unfair labor practice first of all, there is a bit of a couple month period, I think, before this is enrolled as policy. So I don't think there is this immediate way to invoke it for cases that are well along in the pipeline. But every day Starbucks is essentially not bargaining in good faith with the baristas who have voted in the union. And if they're doing that today, if they're saying, no, we're not going to show up this week, call us after Christmas, that
puts them in jeopardy.
That puts them in jeopardy.